Okay, so first, why don't you have 63 workers at least right now, right? So we can see that all the way up to, I bet, 10 minutes. You're making workers like a champ. You got 45 workers at 10 minutes, and that's awesome. So every minute from now on, you should be making 6 workers. So at 11 minutes, you should have 6 more workers. But you don't. You have 2 more workers. And at 12 minutes, you should have 6 more than 48. Boop. But you make 2 workers over that entire minute. And in the next minute, you should be making 6 more workers, and instead you make 0 workers. And in the next minute, you should be making 6 more workers, but instead you make 0 workers. So, I don't have a problem with you cutting workers at 50 if that was your plan. I mean, you're oversaturated on your natural and undersaturated on your main. And if you don't ever plan to saturate your main, I guess you don't really need more workers. But you made the CC pretty early with the intent of taking a third. So why not make the workers so that you can transfer them to your third? Anyway, I would like to see everyone in the universe go to about 70 workers before cutting, because that's 3 base full sat, or soft cap sat. And you should always endeavor to have 3 active bases. So you cut workers at 50, and I wouldn't do that. Unless you're 2 base all-inning, in which case you should have spent every single penny and be ready to attack. Like, if you'd spent every single penny, you could probably win with an all-in from here. But I don't think your plan was to all-in, so you shouldn't be cutting workers. Anyway. That explains why you're missing so much money from your build. Because with 64 workers instead of 50, you would have, I don't know, like 32% more money, I guess. So I really don't like this double-pronged drop you did. I think it was destined to fail, but on top of that, it did fail. You know, like, even if it had succeeded, I would have been like, well, that was a huge risk that was very unlikely to pay off, and it did pay off. So, you know, good for you, but don't do that again. But in this case, it did fail. You lost a bunch of stuff without doing any damage, and that's terrible. So let me explain why. Double-pronged harassing is awesome. Everyone should occasionally double-pronged harassing. But the way double-pronged harassing works, is you have to wait until you see his army at the watchtower and then do it. If you drop in someone's main when their whole army is in their main, you're basically saying, here is about $1,200 worth of troops. I'm going to put it right next to your $4,000 army and see what happens. It's never going to be good. And what you're hoping will happen is that he'll take his giant 4K army and kill one of your drops, while the other drop gets to kill every worker in his main. But imagine even if that had happened. Like, say he had nothing in his main, and you did a double prong drop, and he just dominates this, killing $1,200 worth of troops and only losing 2 Marines, right? And then in his main, you get free reign to kill as much as you can before this army walks all the way up to his main, right? That's like, say, 45 seconds that you have 16 Marines doing as much as they can in someone's main. If he runs his workers away, you're going to kill maybe 2 of them. And then you're stuck shooting at buildings. So maybe you kill 4 supply depots. 2 workers and 4 supply depots is like $500 worth of damage. Does that justify the $1,200 of damage it cost you in distraction fees to get this unhindered access to his base? And even if you kill this command center, right, that theoretically only costs him $550, assuming he drops the mules first, and he replaces it for $550, and you lost $1,200 in order to create that opportunity. And yes, it forces him to stop mining his main, but he's got an unsaturated 30, moves his workers over there, and he doesn't really lose that much mining time. Just in general, even the best case is not very good for a multi-pronged drop when your opponent is not doing anything with his army. If his army is here, and you do a double-pronged drop, you're going to do tons of damage, and it's going to be awesome. But if his army's in his base, don't be dropping his base, man. Never drop your army where his army is. That's just silly. I remember there was a big, long Day 9 daily once. That was what I love about the Day 9 daily is he's saying the blatantly obvious stuff that everyone should already know. So you can quote him, because when you want to tell someone something that you already know, you can be like, no, see, because Day 9 said it, even though like this was so obvious to me and everyone else that we didn't need Day 9 to say it. But he did a whole daily on dropping, and what he said it all comes down to is dropping is just another way to get your troops somewhere. If you can walk your troops somewhere and you drop them there instead, it doesn't buy you a single thing. So dropping in someone's main allows you to get troops to their main. And there's no other way to do that, and that's the only good thing about dropping. But it doesn't make your troops more powerful or more distracting or more effective. If you'd like run your troops to his main and he had been chasing behind them and not quite got them by the time they got to his main and they arrived in his main with full health, that would be the same thing as a drop. The drop doesn't make your troops more powerful. Don't just drop because you can drop. Think about why you want to put your troops there. And in this case, you just don't. So right now, he takes the watchtower. If you had done the drop now, it would have been awesome. So I don't necessarily even recommend that you try to do multi-prong dropping. I feel like the fact that you have 3K unspent in the bank means that you have additional things that need doing in your base. This money needs to be spent, and you're spending your limited attention resource on dropping. And dropping is good, but it's not nearly as good as having $3,700 more army, right? Because that's the amount of money that you have in the bank that is just not army because you didn't build additional buildings and use additional buildings. So if you spent more time looking at your base, you would have spent that money and you would have that much bigger of an army, and you could win just by A-moving. If you're like, look at the army sizes right now. This is 6K against 6K, right? You guys both have about a 6K army. If you had 10K instead of 6K, it'd be 10K against 6K, and you would have almost, 50%, probably 40% bigger army than him. You could just A-move. You wouldn't even need to drop. You wouldn't need to do anything tricky. If you had spent all your money, you would just be able to kill him by virtue of the fact that you spent your money on troops. So again, exact same positioning. This is a stupid position for your troops to be in. And then you do this like thing where you bunch up your Marines in a choke point and let his tanks shoot. And he only has 2 tanks. So really it's not that big a deal. He's only going to get 2 really big tank shots, but those 2 tank shots are going to kill tons and tons of troops. Why are you putting your guys here? We really need to work on your Marine versus tank micro. And your understanding of where troops should be in TVT. Right? So what you want is tanks in front, infantry behind. If he tries to kill your tanks, your infantry steps in front of them. That's what you want. What you had was tanks over here, infantry in front of the tanks. That means that his tanks get to shoot your infantry, but your tanks don't get to shoot his infantry, because his infantry is hiding and yours is not. That's silly. So there are 2 different layouts. You know how in some tactical games they have stances? Like you can set your guys to spread out, or you can set your guys to line stance, or you can set them to like multiple line stance, like 3 rows, or stuff like that. In StarCraft, there are stances too. In Marine tank versus Marine tank, the most common stance is tanks in front, infantry behind them. You guys both square off with tanks, and nobody can move infantry up because it'll instantly get shot at by tanks. That's when you have a big tank count. If your tank count is 5 or more, that's what you want to do. But in this case, you both had a low tank count. Especially him. He has 2 tanks. So the second stance is infantry in front, tanks unsieged in the infantry group as if they were infantry. Spread out, stim, A-move. Right? That's the stance I would have used in this case. But both of those stances would have been better than what you did. So first, in any game beyond about 12 minutes, I should talk quieter because I'm losing my voice. And there's no reason to yell. Who am I trying to talk to? What's happening is I'm wearing headphones, so I can't hear myself, so it makes me talk louder and louder. Anyway, okay. So Marines are like the most powerful unit Terran has, right? In every situation, because Marines are awesome. And the counter to Marines is area of effect damage. If Marines clump up and you splash on them, it hits a billion. It hits like 16 Marines. If you just splash this guy, it'll hit like 16 Marines. So in order to keep Marines powerful, they have to be spread out. So in any game, in any matchup, once your opponent has AoE, in this case tanks, your Marines should be spread out all the time. They should always be pre-spread. So you notice how when your Marines start fighting, they automatically spread out in such a way that the biggest possible tank splash is only like 6 guys. But when they're standing still and not shooting at anyone, they tend to clump up in this little ball, where 16 Marines get hit by a tank splash. That's why, as soon as the tank battle happens, you either want to be out of range of the tanks or fighting. Because if you're fighting, your guys will spread out all by themselves and you don't have to worry about it. And if you're running away, then the tanks can't shoot you. So those are the only two positions that Marines should ever be in. They should either be fighting or running away. So in this case, I'm getting louder again. In this case, you had a bigger army than him. You let his tanks kill it for no reason at all, and then he comes and mops up. So it's 3-3 against 2-2. But you no longer have a bigger army than him. His tanks kill 21 Marines between the 2 tanks. Like, 2 tanks should get 2 tank shots off and kill 0 Marines because you killed them. Anyway. Units lost, massive problem. Again, but it's funny that the first battle you fought in this same position, his tank's on the other side of this obstacle so that you can only approach them in a bunched up line. And then in the second fight, you just positioned your guys in the exact same spot. So silly. This obstacle is great defensively. You can put tanks here and put a Viking over it and then say, ha, now you have to come to me around the obstacle. But the point of putting your tanks by an obstacle is to impede encroachment, impede his ability to walk up and fight them. So it only works if you put your tanks in front and your Marines behind it, and then force him to come to you, because now he has to go around the obstacle and bunch up just the way that you did in this case. So you did 2 things. You got a good defensive stance and then attacked. So you can't do those 2 things together. Again, you're going for a drop. I like this drop because you know where his army is and it's not in his base. So this is going to do a lot of damage. But also I like this drop because if you keep fighting army versus army here, you're just going to lose. His army is now bigger than yours, and there's no way for you to win if the big fight happens sometime soon. You're just going to lose. So that's a perfect time to drop when you know that you can't win a main fight. Like, if you can't kill his army, don't fight it. That is a principle, and you should just totally stick with it. So again, your positioning here is silly. You've got 2 tanks in front, 4 tanks unsieged way off in the back, and your Marines are in your tank line instead of way behind it. So they're just gonna, if you're not looking, they're just gonna kill themselves for no reason. And now the battle starts, so you move your infantry up, again, closer than your tanks. That's not what you want. You want your infantry to be behind the tank line. So first of all, you want a tank line. So your big tank line is actually here. This is a line of tanks. These 2 tanks not in the line, they're just going to die. These SCVs in front of the line, they're going to die. Anything in front of this line is dead. Marines way in front of this line. So I think you wanted actually your line to be here, because you don't want him to get this siege position. So say you have like 2 tanks here and 2 tanks here, and he just walks up with a medevac floating overhead to get vision of the high ground, kills those 2 tanks, and sieges up down here, then you're in big trouble. So in order to protect this area, you'd want your siege line to be down on the low ground. But anyway, we can't change the past, so where your siege line actually is, you want to keep everything further back than that. So again, this drop, as predicted, going to do awesome things. Even going to force him to pull his army back. So this was a really tactically genius drop. But I think this game is already over at this point. So even though this is a good move, doing the drop and everything, you just don't have any money, and your army is smaller than his, and he has 3 command centers, so even if you kill all of his workers, he's going to be able to replace them really quickly, and you're not, and he's going to have more money than you continually. So I would say you've got better you've got better macro skills than this dude. All game long, you've had more money than him, you've mined more money than him, you've spent more money than him, you've gotten good army size. Not relative to like what you should be going for, but relative to him, you've always had more army than him. And the real problem has been what you've done with your troops versus what he's done with his. So this is just as bad. If you want to scout whether he has an expo, send 1 Marine. There's no reason to send this many Marines. It looks like you might get lucky and not run into his army. But yeah, see, you never want less than 100% of your army to be anywhere. You want your whole army in a giant ball. And the only exception is for very brief periods you can run off a small group of troops and try to trade well with nothing. But this, you should never do. Again, his army is home, so you do not attack his home. You never want to attack his full army with less than your full army. These troops are going to die, and they're not going to do any damage. That was just completely wasteful. And I think you might not have known that you had a bigger army than him at that point, and maybe you were doing a desperation move or something. But you scanned, saw that his whole army was here, and then suicided your troops into it. That makes no sense. Why would you do that? So I really think you're trying to be too cute. And what I mean by cute is you're trying to do the sort of multi-pronged, attention-starving harassment stuff that you see the pros do, and it's just not worth doing if you can't spend all your money and win the fights that you need to win. So I would really like to see it for you to give it a chance for like 10 games. Don't do any drops, don't do any run bys, only fight in big giant my army versus your army stuff. And just as importantly as the fact that you're doing the drops wrong and losing a bunch of troops and that's costing you the game, is the idea that you're not yet properly microing your big army fights. And so if you can't handle, like, it's like until you can get enough workers, I don't care which units you make, right? Because if you don't have enough workers, you're not going to have enough money, you're not going to have enough units, and you're just going to lose. And then until you have the right number of units, again, I don't care which units you make. And then until you have the right composition of units and the right army size and the right income, I don't care whether you scout. And then until you have those 4 things all together, I don't care how good your harassment is. StarCraft has a lot of really cool components, but they're in like a pyramid. If you don't have the base level of the pyramid, I don't give a crap how good you are at the higher levels. And far above or below, more crucial, more fundamental, more foundational of a principle in StarCraft than harassing is the big army fight. Until you can properly engage your big army against his big army, there's no point in learning how to harass at all. So here he comes again. His army is only 400 bigger than yours, 500-600. So you have better upgrade. No, you don't. You guys are even on upgrades. So at this point, this should be a pretty even fight. You have defender's advantage, which means that he has a bunch of troops in his main that aren't going to participate in the fight because they just popped out and they're not here yet. Whereas everything that you have popping out is actually part of the fight because it's right here. So you should win this fight. You have a bigger or even-sized local army. Your local army is just as big as his. I predict you're going to lose this fight because of how your troops are laid out. Like, these 2 tanks almost guaranteed not to participate in this fight. This tank probably won't participate. This tank probably won't participate. These troops will either fight by themselves and die or not fight. The guys in the medevacs probably going to die before they even unload. So you gotta, when there's no fight happening, your army should be laid out in such a way that if a fight happens, like while you're AFK getting a drink, your troops will at least perform okay. So this was just silly. Like, all those Marines died and killed 1 Marine, right? Now all of these Marines are going to die, and they're not even going to shoot at anything. They shot at that one Marauder. That one Marauder died, and you lost like 16 Marines. So again, your army should be in a ball. There should be a little ball of your army, and it should move as a group from one place to another. You don't want to say, oh no, he's going to kill my command center, I better send whatever is closest. That doesn't make any sense. If you're going to lose the command center, you're going to lose the command center. You can't save it by suiciding 12 to 32 Marines in small groups. And if you, like, if you'd seen this army coming at the watchtowers, it wouldn't have killed your command center before you knew it was there. And if you don't want to hold the watchtower, you need, like, I'm not familiar enough with this map, but you need to catch it in a place where it can't get to anything. So there's a choke here, and then a choke here, and then a choke here. So you could theoretically try to defend. Now, see, again, you want your army in a ball. So if you keep one Marine up here, and then one Marine over here, and then your whole army is right here, then you see his whole army going up north, then you can walk up north and get there before he does. And again, if you see him walking south, you can walk to the south and get there before he does. But it's much easier even than doing that, is just to hold the two watchtowers with like 4 tanks sieged here, your whole army sitting behind them, and then 1 Marine on this watchtower. And then if he comes to take that watchtower, you move your whole army over here and kill his base. It sounds like my kids are waking up. And my wife's out of town, as they say, so I probably need to go for a bit. But I'll listen, and if they don't come downstairs, then it doesn't count. Anyway, again, you notice formation. Tanks in front, infantry behind it. Get vision, tanks kill everything in range. Tanks move forward a tiny bit, get vision, tanks kill everything in range. The only purpose of the infantry is if you attack him, then the infantry will step in front. But until then, the infantry is not going to shoot. And again, your formation, tanks on the side, infantry in the middle. This is silly. This guy has 5 range, this guy has 13 range. They should not be standing together as if they form a line. They don't. This guy needs to be like way out here to shoot at the same thing as this guy's shooting at. So you need to work on your formations. You need to work on your army positioning, and you need to work on how to engage in tank marine versus tank marine battles. Again, I like this drop. I'm a little worried. So the concept of this drop, right, is that I know where his army is, and it's not here. So I'm going to put my army somewhere where his army isn't. But in order for that to work, you have to be able to you have to be far enough from his army, or have a big enough army of your own that you can resist it if he just kills you. I think actually you're okay. This is 6 tanks against, I don't know, 8 tanks. So it's not that big of a deal. I think you'll be okay if he attacks you. So this is a great drop. Again though, no matter how good this drop is it as good in the positive column as your prior drops were bad in the negative column? I don't think so. I think overall across this game you lost more by dropping than you gained. So even though that was a good drop, you didn't do it properly. Like, you shouldn't have engaged his army with it. You should have done some damage and run away. And on top of that, you just shouldn't have done any drops this game. Like, if you had done no drops this game, I think you would have done a lot better overall. So now we got this sort of soft contain from him that makes no sense because he's got full access to this mining base and isn't killing it. Again, your dudes are just out of position. So once the tank versus tank Mexican standoff happens, where you're both standing right next to each other, this is when going around and killing other things that aren't part of that battle is cool. And so that's what he's doing to you. You've got a turret ring here. Killed all his medevacs. Now it's just like a couple Marines in a tank. Again, you feel starved to me, but he's not making additional bases. So he's starved too, because he starved himself because he's an idiot. He's got full map control, and there's just no reason for him to be starving, and yet he is. And there you go, look at that. Walking into his tank line with those Marines. I don't even think you were looking at them. Okay. You weren't looking, they did some stuff, and then you look, and that's when they go kill themselves. That's so funny. So again, the Marines never want to go in front of the tanks except to defend the tanks. So attack here and then hold position. The Marines should never go further forward than the front tank. Chasing off is silly. Mopped up that drop, I assume, pretty well. These medevacs should come home. They're not doing anything. Don't do it. That was okay because he had only Marauders over here. I hope you knew that though. Because if he'd had even like 8 Marines here, he can kill 2 medevacs before they unload. And then if he unsieges his tanks, kills a couple medevacs, and fights with the Marines and tanks, that's not going to go well. In general, carpet bombing on top of tanks is what you want to do versus a mech player who doesn't have enough Vikings. Whereas in a bio-tank versus bio-tank game, there are rare occasions where you can carpet bomb his tanks, like that one. That was actually good, and that was good that you did it. But it's not going to come up often enough for you to think about it as a likely tactic. Just because both sides should have such a high Marine count that it's never going to be viable. Anyway, you're getting tons of minerals. He's getting no money at all. You've got a smaller army, but now a bigger army. You got 4 bases. He's got none. It's funny that it's 4 bases to none, and yet you're not really mining. This is oversaturated. This is not yet up. This is oversaturated. And none of these bases is mining. You said in your email that you think you probably lost because you didn't take your 3rd and 4th quick enough, or because you repeatedly lost your 4th. And I guess that is why you lost. But I think it's like so far down, far up, you know, on the pyramid, you know, so it's so non-foundational, I guess, is a way to say it, of a reason that, like, it only, like, because the game happened to still be close at the 40-minute mark, you lost because you didn't take your expansions quite early enough. But that's only because your opponent, who had full map control, didn't take a base. You know, it's not like you made this minor mistake, and if you hadn't, you would have won. I guess it is like that. You made this minor mistake, and if you hadn't, you would have won. But only because your opponent is shit. Right? So you do need to take more bases more quickly, and you do need to always have 3 active mining bases. And even, in fact, right now, you don't. You only have 2 active mining bases. So it is important that you expand more. But that's not the primary reason. That's not the primary thing in this game that you could improve upon, you know? Like, because if you'd done everything else right and still not expanded, you would have crushed this game. You would have killed him so many times over. There were more important things that, because you didn't do those more important things, you got down to a situation where at 40 minutes taking an expo, you know, you should have done that and you didn't, and you lost. Yeah. But I mean, if we just even go back to 12 minutes and say, if I had $0 in the bank, I think I would have won this game right now. You know, you've already got a relatively large army. And, I mean, maybe not 12 minutes, maybe 14 or something. But point is, a lot of times during this game, you had even army size with him, with only 50 workers and 3K in the bank. If you'd had nothing in the bank and 80 workers on 3 or 4 bases, then you would have crushed him at all those points during the game. So what you did at 36 minutes, yes, it's a little sad that you didn't expand a little quicker, but that's not really. You don't want to focus on that. It's almost never. There's almost never going to be a game where you play that you should focus on anything that happens after the first 12 or 13 minutes, because usually there's going to be glaring mistakes within those first 12 minutes that are going to be so obvious that there's no point in watching the rest. And in this case, when he did that double tank drop and you lost tons of troops, and then when he attacked here and you lost tons of troops, and then later he attacked here again and you lost tons of troops for no reason, those are the three primary problems in this game. Is just your positioning. And again, you've got two tanks all by themselves with nobody to help them, and he kills them. It's very similar to up here. You had a group of 16 Marines here, and he just walks up and kills them with nobody else to defend them. And you got another group of 16 here. They walked up, and he kills them without any. It's a lot of that happened in this game. When you did the double-pronged drop harass in the very beginning, you dropped a bunch of troops here and a bunch of troops here at the same time, while you had a ton of troops here that weren't participating, and he just takes his whole army, kills these troops, takes his whole base defense army, kills those troops, and you're losing small groups of units without doing any damage with them. Like your army's in too many different places at once. So each one of those places is pretty weak, and it's causing you to lose a bunch of crap without doing any damage. You realize you can actually carpet bomb a PF. Not that you should. He's not mining from it. There's no reason to kill this. But I was just noticing that as you're flying your medevacs over, if you carpet bomb a PF so that your Marines are super spread out, then it's going to kill one Marine every 4 seconds. It takes 4 seconds to kill a Marine. So you can actually kill PFs if you carpet bomb them. Again, you know where his army is, so a drop at this time is a good move. And you're going to do a bunch of damage with this drop, and that's good. And you've done this tactic several times, and it's worked out pretty well. Then he nonsensically suicides his whole army into you. He did not need to do that, but the drop provoked it. So I'd say this drop really won you the game. Even though you've done it over and over, he still wasn't expecting it. It's so funny. But I mean, the drop won you the game probably because it's 40 minutes in, he's not really mining, and he gave up and just suicided his crap. If he had taken bases earlier, he had full map control. He could have at any point taken tons of bases. So this is more of a your opponent was 3 base all-inning and he ran out of money, and he just decided to go with everything he had, and it wasn't quite enough. But until this point, lots of big problems. You repeatedly had a bigger army and lost it. Even right now, if instead of running into your tanks, he goes down here and kills this base and then goes up here and kills this base, I still think he wins. This is definitely him just suiciding. He's just giving up. Very silly of him. But a lot of people don't like long games, so they'll give up. Anyway, back to benchmarking rate. I think we already kind of hit the big points. At 10 minutes, in every game you ever play, you should have 100 supply, and you have 85 with 1,000 in the bank. So you got enough money so that you could theoretically have had 100 supply if you hadn't supply blocked and if you'd spent all that money. So I would say economically you did good in the first 10 minutes. That's the benchmark. And then at 14 minutes, what's the next one? 15 minutes is what I would usually go for. So your 10-minute benchmark, which I would say is the most important benchmark in the entire game, is good. But your 15-minute benchmark, you're looking for 7,500 or 9,000 with 72 workers, right? So you're short 22 workers, and that's a big deal. Army size, you got 53 plus 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 22, 23, 24. So this is 7750. You're actually right on benchmark. That's awesome. Nice. Good job. So it's possible to hit this Army benchmark with 72 workers, but you hit the Army benchmark with 50 workers. So you're in a worse position than you would have been if you hit it with 72 workers, but you're still in a good position. Like, if you'd used your troops perfectly and everything, I think you could have won this game with just the army that you had at this point. Right? Because you could have just set up a tank contained down here and said you can't have a third, and that would have been game over because you've spent more money than he has, and you have 2-2 against his 1-1, and he couldn't have broken your tank contained. So I would say macro-wise, you played well enough. Could have been better, but it was good enough. It was much better than I kind of expected, much better than I see from a lot of other dudes. One big concern of mine is that, again, undersaturated main, oversaturated natural, and cutting workers really early and not taking your expansion until 15 minutes. So really most of this came down to how you use your troops, and we should practice that. Practice that, practice that, practice that. In the unit test map, man. I think you can click arcade and type unit tester online. Q Bunny, the only. I think it's 9.2 by Extracken, mod by Hunter. And you can do this yourself, or we can do it together if you can ever find me online. If GChat, Google Chat, like you've emailed me, so you know my Google name, just add me to GChat, and if you see me on, see if I have time. Whoa, this is not the Unit Tester Online. Somebody lied. They renamed some other map Unit Tester Online. Those bastards. I guess it's 9.6. I'm gonna go. I'll resume recording once I've gotten in there.